I'm Dr. Rasim, a DNB resident from Metropolitan Hospital. Today we have a clinical case presentation, which we think will be worth a discussion. An 8-year-old girl was carried to the OPD with chief complaints of progressive deformity of the entire body, trunk, and limbs since she was the age of 4 years. Also gives complaints of inability to sit, stand, or ambulate since the age of 5 years. History of presenting illness. The child was apparently normal before 4 years with a normal developmental history. When they give history of progressive deformity of the entire body, trunk, and limbs since the age of 4 years, it is gradual in onset with inability to bear weight on the lower limbs since the age of 5 years. There is no mental retardation, no hearing loss. Family history, no similar complaints in the family. Our patient is the third child of a non-consanguineous marriage, born by full-term vaginal hospital delivery with no significant antenatal or postnatal history. The first sibling is a 12-year-old female who is normal. The second was a stillbirth at 9 months, details of which are not available. Third is our patient. And fourth child is a male, 6 years, who is again normal. This is the clinical photograph. So I'll just go briefly through the clinical findings. On general physical examination, our patient is a poorly built and nourished child who's active with a normal IQ. On examination, the salient features of the examination findings are patient had a short stature with short limbs with normal intelligence. There was pectus carinatum, beaded ribs, thoracolumbar kyphoscoliosis, bowing of all long bones, both upper and lower limbs, with widening of the end of the long bones. There was generalized ligamentous laxity and generalized muscle wasting. The joints had near normal range of movements. The sclera appeared gray and to normal. There was no hearing loss and no neurological deficits. Briefly through the clinical photographs. From head to toe examination, the child had a triangular facies. The sclera had a grayish hue and the teeth were grayish brown opalescent teeth. The chest showed the pectus carinatum with prominent sternum, and there was beading of the ribs. Spine, thoracolumbar spine showed kyphoscoliosis. The upper limb, there was anterolateral bowing of the humerus, a cubitus varus deformity at the elbow joint, and widening of the wrist joint. The hand appeared normal. And there was also bowing of the forearm bones. The lower limb, there was anterior bowing of the femur and a varus of the femur, and anteromedial bowing of the leg on both sides. The range of movements were near normal. Patient was able to flex the hip and knee completely, and also at the elbow joint. So to summarize the history, an 8-year-old child was carried to our OPD, who had been normal till 4 years, with progressive deformity of the trunk since 4 years, and patient was non-ambulatory since the age of 5 years. She was born to non-consanguineous marriage with no similar complaints in the family. On clinical examination, there was short stature with normal intelligence, triangular facies, gray sclera and teeth, bowing deformity of all 4 limbs, kyphoscoliosis of the dorsolumbar spine, pectus carinatum, and beaded ribs. With these findings, we consider the differential diagnosis of osteogenesis imperfecta, rickets, and panosteotic fibrous dysplasia.
How did you come to this diagnosis, in the sense what made you think in this way?
Primarily because the child was normal till the age of 2 to 3 years, and there was gradual onset of deformity, and child is non-ambulant and bedridden with bowing of all the limbs. So these features could be found in osteogenesis imperfecta, in very severe rickets, and very rare condition called as panosteotic fibrous dysplasia.
What is the neurological status?
Child is normal.
Of the lower limbs. Normal, is normal. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what type of scoliosis is that? Is it a long C-shaped scoliosis or a S-shaped? Okay.
Yeah.
These 3 diagnoses may be the appropriate one. I don't know anything about the panosteotic fibrous dysplasia. Can you explain that?
Got only after 30 minutes.
Okay.
It is a very rare thing. Only 2-3 papers are present in that.
Okay.
Having seen that child with multiple deformities, who was apparently normal up to the age of 4, then got developed into deformities involving all the 4 limbs, including the spine. and is bedridden for nearly 3 years. She was virtually carried. She is not ambulant at all. The child presented with multiple deformities. The following differential diagnoses were thought of, and then subsequently X-rays were taken to establish a diagnosis. You may proceed with the X-ray findings, please.
Entire body X-ray was done, and the skull showed thin calvaria. The teeth shows slender roots. The crown and roots are disproportionate. The chest showed deformed ribs with bulbous ends, and there is also deformity of the scapula. The pelvis with both hips showed severe osteopenia of the pelvic bones. There was bilateral protrusia stabili. Wall of radiodensities. This has been described for the appearance that we see in the hip joint, where the bones has been fragmented, apparently due to fragmentation of the cartilaginous growth plate. Whorls of radiodensities. The upper limb X-ray shows deformity, shepherd tooth deformity of the proximal humerus, diffuse osteopenia, thinning of the cortex. The wrist joint, both the distal radius and ulna shows widening of the physis, cupping and splaying are seen. The wrist and the hand shows involvement of the small joints, small bones of the, that is metacarpals and the digits. There are only 4 carpal bones, which shows a delay in bone age. The child is now 8 years. The femur with the knee joint shows again thinning of the cortex and widening of the metaphysis. So the X-ray shows deformed long bones with bowing. Cortical thinning is present. There is widening or trumpeting of the metaphysis. There is diffuse osteopenia, trabecular rarefaction, and honeycomb appearance of the bone. The leg X-ray shows anteromedial bowing of the tibia, Seebeck in appearance. The tarsal and metatarsal bones are also involved. You can see the typical honeycomb appearance, thinning of the cortex, and the deformity in the long bones. Skull with cervical spine lateral shows teeth with slender roots. The crown and roots are disproportionate. There is thin calvaria, and vermian bones could be made out in the occipito temporal and parietal area. There is scoliosis of the dorsolateral spine. The spine shows the marked osteoporosis with decreased height of dorsal and lumbar vertebra. There is a wedge compression fracture of D12 leading to a focal kyphosis. So the X-ray of the skeletal survey report was thus: generalized reduction in bone density noted, vermian bones noted in the skull, visualized teeth show slender roots, the crown and roots are disproportionate, suggestive of dentinogenesis imperfecta. The odontoid process of the axis is small in size. However, the relation between the anterior arch of the atlas and dents is maintained. The dorsal and lumbar vertebra show reduction in height with wedge compression fracture of the D12 vertebral body, causing focal kyphotic. All long bones are deformed, showing smooth or gracile bowing associated with cortical thinning and trumpeting of the metaphysis. The ribs are deformed with bulbous anterior ends. There is severe osteopenia of the bone, so the pelvis associated with features of protrusia stabili on both sides. They have suggested an osteogenesis imperfecta TADA type 1 BSD diagnosis. On laboratory investigations, the biochemistry report: calcium was normal, phosphorus was low normal or slightly lower, alkaline phosphatase was severely elevated. With this, final conclusive diagnosis of osteogenesis imperfecta was made.
Hold on for a minute.
Yes.
Dr. Dominic, please. Okay, Rashmi, you go.
Yes, sir. I also think of osteogenesis imperfecta.
Who was that?
Yes, sir. Sanjay, sir.
All right, Sanjay. At least you are awake and listening. Very good.
Yes, sir. Sir, what is that rickets? Severe rickets was also a differential diagnosis. That I did.
It's not showing signs of rickets, rather. In fact, of course, there are a few areas of facial widening. Certain amount of calcium phosphorus was normal, but I think alkaline phosphatase was very restricted. Yeah, but that may be a super added thing, but doesn't produce, well, clinical features could be a severe form of rickets. That also should be considered, no doubt about it. Yeah. Okay, now you move forward, please.
Okay. A discussion regarding osteogenesis imperfecta. It is a genetic disorder of connective tissue typically characterized by bone fragility. Due to 90% is due to a quantitative and qualitative defect in the type 1 collagen formation. And a spectrum of manifestation, severity, and age at which these features occur is very broad, and hence the symptoms are variable. The inheritance is autosomal dominant, which is most common. Spontaneous mutations occur, and autosomal recessive, which are rare. Brief history regarding osteogenesis imperfecta. It dates from the Egyptian times. Most colorful description is probably of Ivar Benlos, who's called the Boneless, a Scandinavian prince who led the invasion of Britain during the 9th century. He was supposedly carried by his troops into the battle on a shield because his limb deformities prevented him from walking. The earliest known case of osteogenesis imperfecta is in a partially mummified infant skeleton from ancient Egypt, which is now housed in the British Museum in London. Osteogenesis imperfecta has also been called by a variety of names: fragilis osseum, osteosclerosis idiopathica, brittle bone disease, Lobstein disease, and Rolex disease. Rolich was the one who used the term osteogenesis imperfecta for the first time. Coming to the pathophysiology of osteogenesis imperfecta, we said it's a genetic defect due to the type 1 collagen. The normal collagen metabolism, formation, what happens is in the fibroblast, in its nucleus, we have the chromosome 17 and chromosome 7, which code for the pro-alpha 1 and pro-alpha 2 necessary for forming the procollagen polypeptide. From these codes, in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, the pro-alpha chain is synthesized. 2 pro-alpha 1 chain and 1 pro-alpha 2 chain combine to form the type 1 procollagen. This procollagen is formed intracellularly and secreted outside, wherein the formation of the collagen triple helix occurs. So this is basically the genetic defect in case of osteogenesis imperfecta. The chromosome 17, there are 2 alpha 1 chain. One of it is mutated, or a stop codon appears, resulting in a reduction in the amount of type 1 collagen, especially in type 1 osteogenesis imperfecta. In the rest of it, type 2 and the others, it is rather than a quantitative, it is a qualitative defect in the collagen. So collagen metabolism in osteogenesis imperfecta, a genetic error in type 1 collagen formation is of 2 basic types, qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative occurs in type 1 due to a stop codon. Qualitative occurs when there is a defect in the collagen, or there is a skip or a mutation. Coming to the classification and heredity, different patterns of inheritance occur. There are 2 classification schemes which are mainly followed: the Sillens classification and Shapiro classification. The Sillens has recently been modified to include an extended Sillens classification by Kohn. Sillens classification delineates 4 different types initially based on the clinical and genetic characteristics. Type 1, 2, 3, and 4. Type 1 and 4 are autosomal dominant, and type 2 and 3 are autosomal recessive. Whenever they are associated with dentigenesis imperfecta, it is referred to as B, and without dentinogenesis imperfecta, it is referred as type A. So this is in brief about the features of each of this. Our case was probably a type 3 because it is a very severe bone deformity, and it was associated with dentigenesis imperfecta. Type 1 is usually the mildest form and more common form. Type 2 is the most severe form, which results in perinatal death. Type 3 and 4 are the moderate severe ones. We think our case is that of a type 3 because it is a severe deformity. There is progressive bowing of the long bones and the spine, and the severe deformity of surviving patients is most commonly what we see is type 3. Patient is non-ambulatory, wheelchair bound, may die in the 3rd decade. The sclera is bluish at birth, which become less blue with age and becomes white in adult. There is kyphoscoliosis, and bones are hypoplastic, and vermian bones are present. Due to all these features, we considered our diagnosis as type 3 osteogenesis imperfecta. Brief about type 3 osteogenesis. It is characterized by both qualitative and quantitative change in type 1 collagen, and inherited as autosomal recessive or dominant negative trait. It is characterized by severe bone fragility, multiple fractures, and progressive marked deformity of the long bones, and severe growth retardation. The sclera are bluish at birth but become less blue with age. In adolescents, sclera are of normal hue. The most severely affected surviving patients often have this type of disease. So in general, Sillence type 1 patients are the least affected individuals. Type 2 patients are almost invariably stillborn or die shortly after birth. Type 3 and 4 are moderately severe, more severely affected patients and constitute the majority of the patients with severe deformity and frequent fractures. An extended Sillence classification has type 1, type 5 to type 11. I've written type 9, but there are further types which has been described from type 5 to type 11. Lucer in 1906 classified it in two types. That is wherein we have the osteogenesis imperfecta congenita and osteogenesis imperfecta tarda. Congenita has fractures at birth and tarda has fractures which occur in the perinatal period. Tarda was further classified by Seedorf. When the fractures occurred in the first year, it is called as tarda brevis, and when the fractures occurred after the first year, it was referred to as tarda levis. Tarda was again classified as type 1 and type 2 by Falvo and associates. If there was long bone bowing, it was referred to as type 1, tarda type 1, and without bowing, it was tarda type 2. The other commonly followed classification is Shapiro's classification. The significance of Shapiro's classification is that it helped in prognosticating survival and the ability of the patient to ambulate. Therein, it has been divided into osteogenesis imperfecta congenita A and B and tarda A and B. Congenita A is with fractures at in utero and birth. There is short, broad, and crumpled femora, the most severe form. And osteogenesis imperfecta congenita B, they have normal long bone contours with fractures at birth. Osteogenesis imperfecta tarda has fractures after birth but before walking. And osteogenesis imperfecta patients tarda B has the fractures which occur after walking. Now, coming to the clinical features of osteogenesis imperfecta, this is a brief description. I have highlighted the factors which are possible in our case in blue. Short stature is common. It is usually due to the deformities in the limb caused by the angulation and also the spine due to marked kyphoscoliosis. Multiple fractures can occur from minimal trauma. The limbs are deformed and short. The skull is soft and membranous. Bowing results from multiple transverse fractures of the long bone and muscle contraction across the weakened diaphysis. There is typically an anterolateral bowing of the or proximal varus deformity of the femur and an anteromedial bowing of the tibia. The forearm may be in minimal pronation with proximal angulation. Elbow joint has cubitus varus with flexion contracture. The forehead is broad with prominent parietal and temporal bones and overhanging occiput. The bulging calvaria causes faciocranial disproportion, giving a triangular elephant shape to the face. The ears are displaced downwards and outwards. The skull has been described as a soldier's helmet or helmet head. Fractures in osteogenesis imperfecta heal normally. Acetabular protrusion or otos pelvis may be present. Spine deformity occurs due to osteoporosis, compression fractures of vertebra, and ligamentous laxity, which results in kyphosis, scoliosis, or both. In some patients, they may present with spondylolisthesis. Cervical spine can have fractures or instability. The more commonly reported cervical anomaly is basilar impression due to the infolding of the margins of the foramen magnum or upward migration of the odontoid process. There is hyperlaxity of the ligaments resulting in hypermobility of the joints. Radial head and the hip joint may occasionally be dislocated. The skin is thin, translucent, and subcutaneous hemorrhage may occur. As a result, surgical scars tend to be wider. The blue sclera may not be present in all types. In type 1, it is distinctly blue throughout life and also in type 2. In type 3, they may be grayish blue at birth but become less blue with increasing age and are white in adulthood. In type 4 osteogenesis imperfecta, blue sclera is usually absent. The other features are the Saturn ring, which is a finding due to white sclera immediately surrounding the cornea. Hyperopia may be present, but vision is usually normal. An opacity in the periphery of the cornea is referred to as arcus juvenilis. Retinal detachment may also occur. Dentinogenesis imperfecta is usually seen in type 1b and type 4b. It is due to a deficiency in dentin. Enamel is usually essentially normal because it is ectodermal and not mesenchymal. Both deciduous and permanent teeth are involved. There is yellowish brown translucent brownish bluish gray discoloration of the teeth. The lower incisors, which erupt first, are the most severely affected. Deafness may occur in osteogenesis imperfecta, but usually begins late into adolescence or adulthood. It is present in 40% of type 1 diseases. Hearing loss can be conduction type or rarely could also be due to compression to the auditory nerve. The cause for conduction type of hearing loss is otosclerosis, where the ossification produces sclerosis of the petrous part of the temporal bone. Some patients, especially type 3, complain of excessive sweating due to a resting hypermetabolic state. Coming to the radiological findings of osteogenesis imperfecta, again, these findings are variable depending on the type, ranging from mild to severe forms. I have tried to describe the severe forms here. The long bones of the limb are short with thin cortexes. The diaphyses are as wide as the metaphyses in very severe cases. Multiple rib fractures and atrophy of thoracic cage can simulate asphyxiating thoracic dysplasia. It helps in differentiating type congenita A from congenita B disease. Popcorn calcification has been described in the metaphysis and epiphyseal area of long bones, especially in type 3. They appear as clustered collection of rounded or scalloped radiolucencies with a sclerotic margin and central radioopacity. They have been referred to in literature as worlds of radiodensities. This was found in our case in pelvis. They represent traumatic fragmentation of cartilaginous growth plate. Popcorn calcifications appear in childhood and usually resolve after completion of the skeletal growth, and their appearance parallels development of growth plate irregularity. Vermian bones are usually seen in osteogenesis imperfecta. They are small intrasutural bones which lie between the cranial sutures formed by the skull wall. To be significant, it has to be more than 10 in number and measure at least 6 by 4 millimeters. This is a radiograph showing the Vermian bones. The spine shows marked osteoporosis. Vertebral bodies are compressed and become concave between bulging discs. Scoliosis and kyphosis eventually develop in congenital severe forms of osteogenesis imperfecta. Laboratory findings in osteogenesis imperfecta. The routine blood investigations are usually normal. Serum calcium and phosphorus levels are normal. Alkaline phosphate levels may be elevated. But in general, the diagnosis of osteogenesis imperfecta can be made with a positive family history and presence of typical clinical and radiographic signs of the condition and does not necessarily depend on lab findings. But biochemical analysis of type 1 collagen obtained from fibroblast culture from skin biopsy specimen of the individual can help in confirming the diagnosis. A brief mention about the treatment. Actually, the ideal treatment of osteogenesis imperfecta would be to correct the genetic defect by replacing the defective COL1A1 or COL1A2 gene. But then, of course, it does not exist as of now. We can consider treatment under medical treatment and orthopedic treatment. Orthopedic treatment involves orthotic management of long bone fractures and deformities, and spinal deformity. The prognosis with children surviving with osteogenesis imperfecta has vastly improved with use of bisphosphonates. They inhibit osteoclastic resorption, which appears to be increasing in osteogenesis imperfecta. The oral agents used are alendronate, olpadronate, and pamidronate. Bone mineral density was improved, resulting in reduction in fracture rate after using bisphosphonates. These are metaphyseal bands or stepladder patterns seen corresponding to the dosage of the bisphosphonates given in a child of osteogenesis imperfecta. Orthopedic treatment. The goal of orthopedic treatment is to maximize the patient's function, prevent deformity and disability, and prevent complications and monitor for potential complications. The orthotic treatment, if long bone fracture is unstable, a minimal external splinting may be used to stabilize the affected limb. And usually fracture healing, because it is normal, will heal in a week or two. The salient features are: avoid excessive and prolonged immobilization in case of osteogenesis imperfecta because it can aggravate osteopenia and cause joint stiffness. Protective bracing can help to prevent fractures and may help in ambulation. Lightweight plastic material and HKFO, hip, knee, ankle, foot orthoses, are required in lower extremity bracing. And air-filled fluted trousers splints have also been used in severely affected children to help them to stand. Non-ambulatory patients are the ideal users of motorized wheelchairs because intelligence is normal and the deformity hinders their day-to-day activities, and it can be helped with a wheelchair. Custom inserts can be used to support the trunk to in cases affected by spinal deformity. It can help in mobility of the patient also. Long bone fractures, it actually depends on the age of the patient. If the child is less than 2 years, it should be managed as any other fracture in a child less than 2 years. In more than 2 years, fractures are immobilized only until the symptoms resolve. And children should be encouraged to return judiciously to their usual level of activity as soon as possible. Sometimes children complain of pain without radiological evidence of fracture. Such cases, we should consider that they have a fracture and treatment should be initiated. In newborns, usually a week or two of splinting is done. In an older child or adult, treatment methods include reduction and casting, percutaneous spinning, and internal fixation. Intramedullary fixation, when internal fixation is considered, intramedullary fixation is usually preferable to plate and screws. Rarely, external fixation has been tried. Coming to the management of long bone deformity, it is usually due to bone fragility, deforming muscular fractures, and repeated deforming muscular forces and repeated fractures. So, therefore, the indication of surgical correction of long bone deformity is repeated fractures induced by the deformity. Indication for surgery further is to remove the deformity so that bracing can be allowed. The methods to correct the long deformity in infants and children are closed osteoclasis without internal fixation, closed osteoclasis with percutaneous intramedullary fixation, open osteotomy with intramedullary fixation, so Fields procedure, and use of extensible intramedullary or telescoping rods. This is X-ray wherein osteoclasis or osteotomy has been done and telescoping rods have been used. This osteotomy is referred as shish kebab osteotomy, wherein multiple osteotomies are done and they're threaded onto the intramedullary nail. This is the fascia dual telescoping system, wherein there is one rod within a rod. Both edges are threaded to fixate on either ends of the bone and it accommodates growth longitudinally. An X-ray of the same. Also, interlocking telescoping nail system is also available, where the proximal and the distal ends are locked, as in this X-ray. Other systems have been used wherein the ends have been hooked to accommodate the either ends and allow growth of the longitudinal growth of the bone. Management of spinal deformity. Spinal orthosis has been rarely indicated. Spinal fusion has been recommended for management of severe cases when there has been more than 40 to 50 degrees of progressive deformity. This is a pre and post-operative X-ray of a child with posterior fusion and instrumentation. Complications that can be anticipated in case of osteogenesis imperfecta are hypoplastic callus formation, tumors, and basilar impression. Hypoplastic callus formation is an acute localized inflammation which is progressive and involves enlargement of the limbs over a period of 1 to 3 weeks. It is painful, warm to touch, and tender on palpation. Can be misdiagnosed as cellulitis or osteomyelitis. Tumor. The most common tumor recorded in osteogenesis imperfecta is osteogenesis sarcoma, but rarely aneurysmal bone cyst and unicameral bone cyst have also been reported. Basilar impression. It is an unusual but well-recognized complication. It is due to pathological bone softening. The margins of the foramen magnum invaginate into the posterior cranial fossa, thereby translocating the upper cervical spine into this depression. It produces direct brain stem compression and alteration in the cerebrospinal fluid dynamics. Patient can present with headaches, facial spasm, numbness, and bulbar symptoms. That's it. Thank you.
Dr. Asim, can you go back to that biochemical findings?
The alkaline phosphate is elevated and phosphorus is slightly low, or this is low normal.
Alkaline phosphatase is elevated. Was there a vitamin D evaluation done or not?
No, sir. Patient was lost to follow-up, so further investigation could not be done.
No, because Dr. Sanjay raised a very pertinent point. Could it be a severe form of rickets? Well,
yes, so we cannot rule out rickets, sir, but then it cannot be nutritional because the rest of the siblings are normal. It can be hypophosphatemic, very severe form.
yeah, but the whole point is the child was bedridden You don't get a ricket completely bedridden like that, but you can. But in a very
Yes.
form of whether this is a hypophosphatemic form of rickets, well, that question has to be answered. Apart from
Yes, sir.
osteogenesis being an osteogenesis imperfect, but alkaline phosphatase is very high. Uh, Unfortunately, the child was lost for follow-up, so probably a biopsy was not done also.
No, sir.
Right. Rest of the things are based on the provisional diagnosis of osteogenesis imperfecta and its management protocol. But the whole point is we need to come across, need to come to a diagnosis which everybody agrees upon. That is the problem. But is there a possibility of it being a rarer form of rickets? Only a genetical study probably will be able to do that. Probably you need a jejunal biopsy to know whether the absorption of the vitamin D levels are normal. But sometimes you need a further renal studies to find out whether there is any tubular form of rickets. But the phosphorus appears to be a little low here, actually, but 2.2.
Yes, sir.
It's not very, for a child, it probably the reference range given is 2.5 to 5. But you could consider that because that's another possibility. But looking at the overall picture, the child being bedridden, etc., I would probably go in for a diagnosis of an osteogenesis. So that means that the whole point is the child presenting with multiple deformities, how to arrive at a working diagnosis. That should be the problem of the postgraduate student. The child was bedridden, carried, etc., and looking at those deformities, anybody could think in terms of a very severe form of rickets or osteogenesis imperfecta. But considering that the child is bedridden, because rickets is a little progressive disorder, the child would be walking a little more. It won't be bedridden and paralyzed like this. So with multiple fractures, etc. Actually, I forgot to ask Dr. Asin, was there any history of multiple fractures being treated for various medical treatment fractures of the long bones?
No, no, sir. No such history, sir. The patient has been
Yeah.
bedridden since 3-4 years. There was no history of trauma as such. The only fracture we have in our case is the D12 compression fracture.
Right, because this form of the multiple deformities, etc., could be due to that. But we should have had a biopsy, and that would probably settle down. And nowadays, even genetical studies are there. So, from the postgraduate point of view, these two diagnoses must be entertained: a severe form of unusual form of rickets, like hypophosphatemic rickets or a vitamin D insensitivity, etc., and osteogenesis imperfecta. A genetic study will try to establish a diagnosis of osteogenesis imperfecta because collagen studies are available these days. X-rays are suggestive of an osteogenesis imperfecta. A biopsy would tell us whether there are any rachitic changes. Could you go back to the X-ray of the hand? Yeah, there are features suggestive of a rachitic changes in the ulna and radius. So, Rasim, do you agree that it could be a form of rickets also?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely, sir.
Yeah,
It could be,
because
sir.
hand shows metaphyseal widening, upping with multiple
The short stature is there and delayed bone age.
Yeah,
All
loss of
compared to the rickets.
loss of provisional zone of calcification, all those things are there. So naturally, that has to be considered as a possibility.
Except that an extremely severe form of rickets, sir.
That is true. Not the nutritional type, but other form of genetic type, like the hypophosphatemic, etc. That could be considered. That possibility should be actually. We should thank Dr. Sanjay for bringing out that particular point. Sanjay, do you have anything to add?
Nothing, sir. But sir, one question: how did the patient was lost to follow? Was the parents willing to take further treatment? What was the attitude of the parents? Sir,
Well, we don't know. The child was lost for follow-up. Whether it is surviving or not, also we do not know. That particular point was actually interesting. That's why I wanted to go back to the X-ray of the hand because that will show whether there are any evidence of this thing. So it could be an unusual form of rickets also. That's what I wanted. But since
Yes,
there are
yes,
no other, I think between you and me, we'll have to come to a diagnosis. There's nobody else.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll call it a day then.